Joining me now is John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. John, good to see you at the beginning of a week as always.
Good to see you.
All right, we've got the end of the legislative session is within our eyesight here. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. What do you think is going to be, what's going to be the definition of this legislative session? How is it going to be remembered?
Well, positively, for those who want to look at it positively, it is the consummation of the conservative takeover of Arkansas. This was the session in which the very conservative legislature came into maturity and asserted its conservative philosophy. And no matter what the governor, who was not conservative enough, thought. From my view and from other negative views, it's been largely a catastrophe and a mean-spirited, petty, impractical, philosophically zealous session that has set the state back. I go with the latter, but there are those who like it, and this is their time. They've got it. They've won the elections. And the legislature darn sure exercised the spoils of victory in this session.
So we do know that there's going to be a couple constitutional amendments referred. I guess just to set you up with a T-ball and in Little League, which one are you most looking forward to voting against?
I am looking forward most to voting against. Well, wait a minute. Do we know what the third one is? Is that the?
We haven't seen the third one make its way through yet. So.
Well, yeah, but that probably gives a state right of religious freedom.
Correct.
Which already exists. I would look forward to voting against that. But of the two we know of, the amendment to allow the legislature to call itself into special session, I will gladly vote against. Anxiously vote against. It would be my most enjoyable no vote. The concept isn't horrible. Many states have allowed the legislature is allowed to call themselves into session in one form or another by a vote or a suspension of the rules or by its leadership. But Arkansas is a state where the governor only gets governor can be overridden by a simple majority vote, thus creating an imbalance of power on making laws. One advantage the governor has in trying to keep a little bit of balance is when the legislature goes home, they can't come back on their own call. He runs the state as the chief executive. And I might someday go for a pair. I'd go put these two things together, raise the veto to 67 and call yourselves into session. But I'd have to think about that at the time. The other, there's a legislative power play going on here. These guys are really fired up about their new power and their new maturity and having been down here a few years. And they're going to say that voters will not approve constitutional amendments, whether referred or initiated, and initiated acts also cannot be passed without a 60% majority of the people at the electorate. I'll also look forward to voting against that, even though the concept is good. Sometimes you have to rise above concept. Sometimes you have to rise above principle even. And the principle of valuing a constitutional amendment to require an extraordinary vote is a sound one that I've advocated before. It's as simple as I don't want these guys to be able to make laws by 50% when the people will be removed of their ability to do so by a simple majority and required to do extraordinary. I think there may be great need in this state for the people to make their own laws in the face of some of what we see at this legislature.
What will be the voting percentage needed to make it 60% to pass a constitutional amendment?
What do you mean? What will be the voting percentage? It'd be 60%.
No, what will need to be passed
I see what you're saying.
To get it to 60%?
Yes. This is a point that some have made. I think it's unfair, but it's interesting. This amendment to be referred to say it takes 60% to pass any future amendment would itself be a constitutional amendment that would be passed by a mere 50%. Is that what you're wanting me to say? Is that what you wanted me
That's
to?
what I was getting at. Yes.
So there are many saying, well, you ought to require that 60% be required on this one if the point of it is to make 60% the requisite. Otherwise, of course, you cannot go beyond the existing Constitution and say we're going to voluntarily decide that this only becomes law by 60%. So I find that an interesting observation and a nice rhetorical point, but not exactly fair or appropriate to this argument.
All right. You said earlier you had a problem with religious freedom. What's your problem with religious freedom if that one winds up?
We got religious freedom. You know, the U.S. Constitution has a Bill of Rights, and people have freedom to be religious as they choose, or have the freedom not to be religious. We fought this battle between religious freedom, getting in touch with people's right to discriminate based on religion. We fought it. We got a statute that we hammered out a few years ago. It's been fought at the federal level. Apparently, this amendment would make clear that in Arkansas, you would have a state right of religious freedom, which would allow you to I don't know.
Pray harder, John. Pray harder.
Or exercise your religion in a way that couldn't be called illegal or discriminatory. Whereas existing statute tries to arrive at some balance there. So I think that's a Rapert thing, and it's something like that on the ballot. Free religion, I give that one very high chance of passage if the people get a chance to vote for freedom of religion, which they already have, fully, and should have, thank goodness.
And to be fair, that is also a potential amendment that drives out voter turnout for conservative basis as well. Not that it's necessarily needed in a highly Republican state like Arkansas, but it would certainly benefit Republicans in terms of the conservative vote there. Last question for you here. Governor Asa Hutchinson and the legislative leadership held a press conference at the tail end of last week to really talk about some of the successes of the session, particularly on the fiscal front there. What can you point to as having been successful? What will the governor brag about? What do you think he should brag about in this legislative session?
I'll tell you one thing he bragged about the other day. I sent him a message about something and he sent back an answer to that, but he also said, I believe you predicted we weren't going to pass the Medicaid expansion. And I sent back, I don't know what you're talking about. But I did suggest there would be difficulty in getting this uncommonly right-wing legislature to arrive at the usual 3/4 vote to continue the Arkansas Works or Arkansas, whatever it is now. What is it? Arkansas Home?
And it was difficult. It took them 5 tries to get it through.
It took them 5, but they got it done, and he was so pleased that they got done, because if that doesn't get done, we got healthcare funding crisis across rural Arkansas at the Med Center, and the budget falls apart. So he was chortling a little bit. The budget is sound. It produces, and we inherit a nice surplus. Some bills that he wanted, I can't enumerate them now because he didn't have a high-profile agenda, because the high-profile agenda was the legislature's. But he can accurately say, and let me put it in my words, hey, the stuff I had to have done administratively to do my job, we got it done. Wipe our brow, we got it done. And the other stuff, that's something else. But the central things that we wanted to keep this state on track, from our point of view, we got them done, and without any major blow-ups. And, he had to give on his emergency powers and the process by which he does those sorts of things. So he can say, I went through this minefield and I'm still alive. Now, this celebration that we got everything done the state needed to have done is belied by bad national publicity and bad national image resulting from the extreme hateful conservatism of some of the measures that he allowed to become law, or that became law in one case, despite his veto through an override. But that he is entitled as the governor to say, I didn't do that. I worked with it as best I could. I weathered it. And otherwise we did all right. And I guess he did. The state didn't explode. We're still here. and we're going to have a budget.
So the legislature stays in recess after they
Right.
get done this week until September-ish, when they're going to come back and do redistricting. And then they're going to adjourn after they do redistricting, immediately go into a special session for tax cuts, I think, with the surplus that's expected to have built up by the end.
And then come back for their fiscal session. So they're going to be. Well, go ahead. What's your question?
Well, you're making the point. They're going to be around a lot, but I'm
yeah, they don't really need so much to call themselves into session unless the governor tries to do something like a mask mandate again. And by George, they want to be able to call themselves down here. But yeah, they're going to be. There's going to be a lot of legislative activity beginning, if not before, from some special needs. Certainly in September, October, and then on taxes, which are deferred, and then the fiscal session starting in January. They're going to be down here a lot, and I mean not on the census, on the redistricting. Remember, congressional redistricting is the legislature's responsibility, and we don't have numbers yet. So, procedurally, yeah, they could have said we adjourn, and we trust Governor Hutchinson to call us back into special session to let us do our constitutional duty when we get the numbers. And you know what? I bet he would have obliged them on that. But no, they want to recess and maintain the power unto themselves while in recess to come back and do whatever they might vote by any suspension of the rules required to do. So we're getting kind of close to a full-time legislature right now without their constitutional amendment.
And between now and next week, I want you to start assessing the odds that they call themselves back into session before they deal with redistricting. So I don't want that answer today. I want you to keep that on the burner for next week. But start.
You want me to give like an over/under on the number of days, or just assess the odds? Okay.
I want odds. I want 50-50, 60-40, whatever you think. But you think about it. I want you to chew on that one a while. All right.
I will. I'll try to give a thoughtful response to that. Thank you, man.
The always thoughtful John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Thank you, John.
So long.
That's all for today's Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.